Hello and welcome to Co-op Gaming Cast Episode 3. I'm John,
I'm Genevieve.
and we did have Bird for our first try doing this, but we had some technical issues and ended up having to waste it.
He just flapped and left the
Yeah,
frame
he
as
just,
he usually does anyway.
as is his
He
custom,
thinks all this is weird and he
He-
doesn't want to be around
and
it.
he hates this corner of the house, but he will come here all on his own at any time.
Just to try to turn on the computer.
Yeah, and like my laptop here is covered with his weird little bird flakes and stuff
Bird feathers.
from all his time of like dicking around with this laptop.
He hates having his picture taken. He hates having any kind of screen in his face.
Yeah, and like if you even point a phone at him, he
He
knows
goes crazy.
Yeah, he knows something's going on and he does
doesn't
not like
like
it. Yeah. But I did do a bad little recording of Bird, so here it is.
Maybe you can kind of hear him, although
Yeah, it's quiet, but
it's not his most distinctive coo that he
Yeah.
makes.
yeah. So anyway, today we were going to be talking about our time playing The Division 2.
We were going to talk about things we were appreciating kind of as we were playing last night. Mainly things we were appreciating, a couple things we weren't, but we're still not very far in the game. We just reached level 30.
We reached max level, but apparently that doesn't mean very much in games these days. Like, it took us like 2 or 3 weeks to get to like max level, but now there's some other kind of level up going on, and like the gear is all better now. So it's like it's another game where there's kind of like the game where you're playing at low levels, and then there's kind of like the end game.
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't gotten there yet. But it's been a pleasure to play it. The first thing we wanted to talk about was how special and fluid a lot of the user interfaces in there.
Right. I mean, The Division 2, I'd say it has one of the better interfaces in any game we've ever played. Maybe even the best.
Yeah, maybe the best of any
Not
game
that
we
that's
ever
like
played.
a high bar to hurdle, because most games just have really bad interfaces. Like almost any game you can think of off the top of your head has like a pretty bad interface. Like just think of like Monster Hunter, how like it was so hard to do anything there, and you were kind of like always kind of like running to different corners of the map, and you didn't know what was going on, and it like
Yeah,
stuff was
and
hard to
even in
figure out.
Path of Exile, I never got used to how to close out of menus. Depending on like the menu, there was different buttons to hit. Or
Right.
like you
Yeah,
close your
you-
inventory with one button, and then you
Yeah,
close.
you had to close it with like the touchpad on the PS, the DualShock controller. Like one of the menus you had to close with the touchpad, and then other menus you close with O, which I guess is like the more standard way most games have you closing something.
Yeah, and not having uniform commands is like a pretty low.
Right.
Pretty low
Yeah,
bar
yeah.
for-
That's like stuff that was like solved in the early days of computers, and
Yeah.
like now with games being like bizarre little computer programs, like kind of these old problems like come up again because people are always like reinventing the wheel, I guess.
It occurs to me that it's a pretty boring way to start out talking about this, but one thing that I always appreciate being kind of brain dead while I play is how it shows you when you swap weapons. It shows a brief indicator kind of at the top of the screen
Oh, right.
of which weapon you swapped to, and it's real subtle and easy to see in there, so you never get messed up or forget what weapon you had or what you swapped to.
Right. So, yeah, in Division, like everything is kind of like that, where there's always kind of like a little tooltip. If there's a moment where you might be confused, there's like a little tooltip, or anytime like you're going to interact with something, the button shows up on the screen. And you know how like when you come up to a new area and like it wants you to like press the down arrow in order to like look at the monument or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it always like puts this really unobtrusive kind of like little overlay that it doesn't bother you, but you definitely will see it. And so like even everything in the interface in Division is just like placed in places where like I, the gamer, might be looking at that time. And it's like,
It doesn't bother you, but it is there for you if you want it, and kind of quick and easy to see.
Right. It's just it's really done well.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the other things like that we had on our list when, and I'm sure there's a ton more that other people
Oh
have
right,
noticed or.
and yeah, like like the weapon thing, like when you're doing the weapon swap and it shows it, like for websites and you or like just any website, there's like the breadcrumbs, and so a breadcrumb on a website shows you where you're at in like the structure of the website, and it's like a real small thing that is like almost completely insignificant, but it actually makes a huge difference for the user.
For navigating
Yeah,
and
and
orienting yourself
right,
to the
right.
information you're looking at and where you want to go.
Right. And so like everything in Division there's kind of like a breadcrumb for it where like it's telling you like what you're doing, what you're looking at, like where you are on the map, and like with the way the missions are overlaid and everything. So like it's and even like the mini map on the interface in Division, it's like it's really shows like a lot of information, and it doesn't take up like a lot of screen space. It does like you don't have to open the map in order to like figure out where you're at in the game because even the mini map's done well.
Yeah, yeah. But some of the other little things we were appreciating, everything that has a duration, like your skill cooldowns, but even little things like how long it takes to reload your gun. Division gives you a little indicator showing how long is left. And
Oh right, and even another small thing that's just like that is like if you're using a shotgun that has like 6 shells or something, there's a little overlay kind of like right near your crosshair that shows you like exactly how many bullets are like left in your chamber or whatever. So like
so you're
even
never guessing. You never have to think about it. If you're
right,
wondering, you can
right.
look at it. It's
Mhm.
really fast, easy, reload, do whatever you
Right,
need to do.
and there's like redundancy too, where like when you're playing a first-person shooter, like any shooter game, you sometimes like keep track of your ammo. And so there's like the ammo thing in the bottom right, which is like where you normally go to look at how much like ammo you're carrying or how many like rounds you have left. And then there's like the little overlay near the crosshair. So it's like showing it to you in two places, and that just it does like so much in terms of like just like always knowing what's going on, and it's like another like kind of small UI element they threw in there that is like really great in my
Yeah,
opinion.
yeah, and easy to appreciate.
Hmm.
We were talking about the map a little bit when we were thinking about how nice it is that the quests in this game kind of just populate onto the larger map. Excuse me. So when you're plotting your route across the city, it's fast and easy and convenient. Get these 3 things done, move over here, yada yada. But when we were talking about it, I realized it was so seamlessly done in Division 2 that I didn't even notice the absence of the terrible quest log where you're always kind of scrolling through and figuring out what you missed and what you didn't do and what you still need to do and where all these different things are located. There's still a little bit of that because there's the projects and
Oh right, there's like a little bit of that, but it's such like a nice seamless experience where you can look at your map and kind of like see how many quests you like have left to do in the map, and then also you're able to kind of like plan a route, and so it makes it so where like the map gives a ton of information that like in other games that information probably wouldn't be there. So like in other games you're kind of like cross-referencing your quest log that might like refer to an area on the map, and then you're like looking at the map, you know what I mean? So like they did a really good job in Division where they like kind of like unify information for the user. And then, like with the user interface being good, it just makes it kind of like a pleasant experience to play where
it cuts down on so much frustration that you really don't want to have to deal with when you're just trying to play a game. All that kind of like messing around to figure out what quests you missed or all those like moments where you're wondering something and don't have the information that you need or it takes a while to find it.
right, you can really tell they put kind of like a lot of like thought and care into just all those small aspects of the game.
Yeah, and I remember when we first booted it up, we had been playing something else that really like trapped you in the long load screens. Oh, maybe we were playing Naruto where you're just stuck there sitting in the queue and it just basically says queue and you're on like a frozen screen.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then you were remarking how in Division even when you're in the loading screen, it's kind of filled with like the information and the
Oh, right. And there's like stuff you're like looking at. So it even makes the loading screens, when you do get a loading screen, like less obtrusive and
yeah,
less
yeah.
like disruptive.
Not that it's so uncommon to put tips and stuff in there.
Right, right. But it's just like part of the whole system where the game is like pleasant to log into and move around, which we kind of like talked about a little bit in the last video. But remember how we were talking about how you can kind of traverse the entire map without doing a loading screen if you so choose.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something Ubisoft probably was like thinking about too, like no load screen experience that like the user can have.
Can have if they wish to, yeah.
Right, and that kind of goes to like the user interface thing, I'd say, where they really thought about like the player experience a lot, I think. And so that's good for it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Again, that was probably the most boring thing to start out talking
Right,
about. But
pretty boring, but it is the first thing you touch when you like play a game.
yeah, and
Although it's probably not the first thing you want to think about. Like you want to think about maybe like having fun or like
killing the enemy.
Yeah, killing the enemies, and Division does that pretty good too. But we'll get to that, right?
Yeah. Next, we were gonna talk a little. I couldn't believe in this game. The other day, I was like rezzing John, and then I couldn't believe that the game let me target my drone to like an enemy that was rushing toward us or something while I was rezzing.
Oh, yeah,
And
that's really cool.
yeah, and there's tons of stuff like that in this game that it's like I wouldn't even think to try it because I'm so used to not being able to do two commands at once.
Totally. And that just goes right into, remember, like, it was only 3 or 4 days ago that I realized that, like, while your character is, like, sprinting or jumping, you can, like, enter a weapon switch command, and he'll do it while you're sprinting.
Or even duck rolling, right? That was the most amazing thing.
Right,
being able to weapon swap while duck rolling.
And I guess technically the game is kind of like queuing up the commands. So like while your guy is duck rolling and you press weapon swap, it like registers that as a button hit and does it as soon as like your avatar is able to. And so that's really cool because like probably every other game we've played, maybe some other shooter games like are also well done in that respect.
Yeah, if people know about it, let us know. These things where you can switch weapons while you're duck rolling, or like kind of target your drone while you're rezzing another player.
Oh, right. And
I'm sure there's tons of other stuff like that in this game.
Right. Another thing related to the like commanding the drone while you're rezzing is you can, so in this game they give you the option to dismantle your skill before it ends, and then they have the cooldown, right? Like, when you have the drone, you like, if you take it apart before its cooldown ends or it dies, you like take half the cooldown time off of it. But anyway, so sometimes like you're in a rush to kill the drone or like kill the turret or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's really cool because you can kind of cancel the drone while you're like commanding a turret or like shooting at the enemy. So you're able to like do that
at the same time
parallel with like anything else you're doing. And then you can like control both skills in parallel, and like all that stuff is just so awesome compared to like pretty much every other game we play where like you press a button.
It's one thing at a time.
Yeah. And then you have to like wait until you're done like completing whatever like action your guy's taking or whatever. But yeah, that's like, it's like another small thing that's just like makes the game kind of a joy to play.
Yeah, and it's another thing that kind of cuts down on frustration or mental work in a tiny way that you don't really notice. But then when you're playing the game as a whole, really makes it kind of like a pleasure and pretty much fun.
Right. And it makes you kind of wish that like every game had such nice controls, or like every game had like a nice interface,
Yeah.
And it's certainly not out of question, I guess. Oh, but another thing related to the movement and commands I just thought of, I guess, it's really the way that you can move from cover to cover, and then you press O to like vault over the cover. You're just able to move your avatar so smoothly through like the urban environment in the game. And like you can move your guy completely without ever like pressing the movement button. You know what I mean? Like you can you can kind of like look at another piece of cover and then hold X and move to it. So like you're even able to move and have your guy kind of jump over obstacles without actually pressing or like using the left thumbstick to move. And that's another part that's like really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think we've played any game where you could move kind of as long as you want without using the movement stick.
Right. And not only that, but kind of move in, let's say, a combat effective way.
Yeah.
And that's like, I guess that's like redundancy of controls. I'm sure they kind of like talked about that system or whatever in their meetings, but it's just like, it's just really well done. I really like how you how you can move.
Other little things on our things we were appreciating about the game. I don't know if this was something we were appreciating or noticing, or that was just funny, or that I was trying to remember how it worked in a lot of other games. To what degree the NPCs will actually help you take down the enemy. In this game, I don't think I've ever seen one kill an enemy without your input. An NPC take down an enemy. No, do you think you've seen it?
I don't know if I've seen that, but I feel like there's been times where during some of those control point captures where you get about 4 to 6 NPCs rush in, I feel like I've seen them kind of like gang up on and kill bosses.
Oh, no way. I don't think you've seen them do fatal on a boss.
I feel like I have, but
Okay.
I'm not sure.
All right, so we're in contention about that. I don't know what we were going to talk about anyway. When you come across the NPCs fighting the boss.
Oh, right. Well,
they're
okay.
like frozen.
That might be two separate things, because I think, first of all, what's going on there, like, okay, so you're in the map in Division, and then you come across like an NPC and like a boss enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they're kind of like play acting fighting. And I think what's going on there is that the game just isn't triggering them.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't trigger them until you arrive.
Come onto the scene.
Yeah, I know. Two separate things, but I still challenge you to take video of an NPC doing fatal to a boss. Well, no way.
I do feel like there was a time that they were like all shooting at the boss and the boss died. And now maybe like you were shooting too, and I thought of you as like another NPC.
I probably killed that boss. Well, anyway, I don't know why that matters. It's just interesting to kind of like watch their behavior and to what degree they do any damage or assist you at the checkpoints or whatever you're doing.
And speaking of the NPCs, it's always kind of nice to come across them on the map. And like they're doing, remember how sometimes they're like roaming. Sometimes it says like NPC
says their
scavenging.
Activity or the enemies as well.
Oh, and it says like repairing and stuff. And then you can kind of walk up to them and like give them a rope for the repair or whatever. And it's pretty funny. I don't know.
There was something else I wanted to say about it, but I guess I can't remember now. Oh yeah, just that every time the like fat boss is there with his hammer, I've never managed to kill the boss fast enough to save that poor NPC.
Oh, right.
The boss always destroys the NPC in these really like graphic, brutal scenes of the boss
it's just
with
brutal, like a guy with like a 40-pound sledgehammer
just wailing on.
On he like brings it down heavy on the NPC's head, and then there's like a corpse there, and you're like, oh god.
Yeah,
like,
every time it happens, we always kind of howl like, oh, and you just see like the boss slamming that NPC with his huge hammer.
And like you really do want to kind of like save them, and then you can't, and you just are like watching these kind of brutal murders happen in front of your face as you kind of are completely powerless to do anything. Were you looking at this outline we've got doesn't seem to be written in kind of like any type of sequential order, so we're getting a little bit confused here, or at least I
wrote it. It's my bad. I failed to organize or make sense of any of the ideas.
Right. Well, okay, if we can skip down since we were like talking about the map.
Yeah.
So we're talking about Division 2, and the map is maybe a little bit small, but I really feel like the map is nicely done. It's like fun to explore. It seems almost like it might be a scale model of Washington D.C. Like I bet you if we like look at the streets, like remember there was like Columbus Avenue.
Yeah, yeah, but
Yeah.
we still haven't looked it up. We're still talking about this. Just look up if it is.
You want me to look it up right now? Well, maybe I will. Well, let's see.
Sure, yeah.
Columbus.
Making people watch us literally Google something. No, look up, is Division 2 scale model of Washington, D.C.?
Okay, well, yeah, this isn't what I wanted to talk about. Okay. But anyway, when you're going through that map in Division, it kind of begins when you're like a newbie in the game. It begins as this really kind of like hostile land, like crawling with gang members, I guess. And there's always like the shooting in the streets. And then as you kind of like progressively move through the map and you capture control points and like do more of the
And
activities.
slaughter those gang members.
Yeah, and
That's what you're.
basically you kill the enemy gangs, and you're like you yourself are part of some like official USA gang or something like that. And then, but anyway, as you go through the map, it really becomes kind of like a safe place, and you can see like the NPCs kind of populate it and do stuff like gather water and crap like that.
Yes, you
And
get a
so-
real and significant feeling of progress or having done something
Right,
as you
right.
convert all these kind of dangerous war-torn areas into
Right, like in
safe
essence,
and friendly for
yeah,
your
yeah.
gang or whatever
Right,
your
yeah,
affiliation is.
Or
in the
like
gang.
you're kind of like gentrifying, and
Yeah,
you're, like,
wha-
you're going through the bad neighborhoods. Oh, and remember there was a certain quest we had where the routing, which is just like Google Maps, it sent us through a higher level area, and it was like a different neighborhood, and it really felt like Google Maps sent us through the ghetto. And like remember we just like very quickly died,
Oh,
and we
yeah,
were
yeah.
surrounded by all these guys we didn't recognize. And so the map really feels alive, I guess. And anyway, we did Google, and it looks like
It
it's
is
a
a
full
scale
scale
version.
version of Washington D.C. So that's really cool. And one of the things I was kind of appreciating was that I could open the map and zoom in and see like the streets and the cross streets, and I could kind of think to myself like, oh, like we just need to go west on Columbus Avenue until we get to 4th or whatever. And then like thinking
navigate using kind of real human directions
right,
instead of
right.
just
And that was just like so cool to do in a game, because normally in a game you're doing something weird with the map where you're kind of like interpreting it and making sense of it, but it has nothing to do with your actual human ability to like read a human map.
yeah.
So the way it's like kind of a full scale Washington D.C. and you can kind of like use the streets and reference where you are. It's like it's really cool. It's nothing I've ever like experienced in a game. And I remember as a kid there was like a game that claimed it was like it had like a scale version of Chicago in it. It was like a racing game, and I made my mom buy it. And imagine my like kind of horror and disgust when like by Chicago what they meant was it kind of seemed to have like Lakeshore Drive.
Oh,
And
oh,
like,
it's like you can race on Lake.
yeah,
Shore
like
Drive,
you
yeah.
can race like in scenes from Chicago. And then like there were parts where it was supposedly like in the city, but it was just kind of like some crappy computer generated
Mhm.
kind of like, you know, like crisscrosses, and there were like no actual like landmarks, and it had nothing to do with like Chicago or the streets in Chicago. And I remember as a kid, I even kind of actively thought I'd be able to see like our house since we lived in Chicago.
Yeah, yeah.
And like you were racing in Chicago. I was like, oh yeah, like what if we go down like Western and I'll see like at least see Lane Tech, which is a high school there.
Uh-huh.
And like there was nothing like
You were
that.
sorely disappointed.
Yeah, yeah. But like now, maybe like 20 or 25 years later, like some game company has really done that. And in a way, I kind of wish I knew Washington, D.C. a little better, and maybe that would actually kind of improve the experience of playing Division 2, like to see something where like you walk past and it's kind of like rendered in the game. It might be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing kind of relating to the maps I wanted to talk about is just how nicely everything is like scaled and set up. And the specific example I wanted to talk about is just that me and Genevieve were kind of like a little bit lost, and I noticed we were like in a parking garage, and I thought like, oh, I'll just try to like go out of this parking garage as if I was really trying to like find my way out of a parking garage in real life, and it actually like worked.
Yeah, because it
So
is just a
right,
realistic
and it's
parking
like
garage in the
yeah,
game.
yeah,
And you don't even tend to think of things in those terms when you're playing a video game. You just think
right,
like,
yeah,
quest, guide me, get out of
yeah,
here. I don't
yeah,
know what all this crap is.
right. And then even in games, I'm sure I've played games where like we fought in parking garages before,
Yeah.
but never before Division 2 did I actually think like, oh my god, this is like an actual parking garage.
Yeah.
And it so like the scale is like it's like right there, and it's like really done well. And I'm sure like whoever the map designers were kind of just were like going off actual parking garages, maybe even in Washington D.C. I don't know. Okay. So awkward silence. So okay, anyway, we talked about the map. It's not on our notes, but I remember we want to talk about kind of the urban scenes, or maybe I was the one who wanted to talk about
Yeah,
that.
you really wanted to talk about the urban scenes. I was about to remind you, but I don't know. You wanted to talk about how cool it is to get to fight like there was like an area downtown in Chicago. It's like
Oh,
really old between like three skyscrapers kind of like elevated above Michigan Avenue.
right at Michigan and Lake, if you've ever been there, there's all those like kind of officey buildings that were like done by Mies van der Rohe or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. But if you're driving or walking or something down there, you would never notice this kind of secondary upper layer where there's all kinds of stuff up there, kind of like benches or almost like an entire park and like staircases leading kind of between the skyscrapers to different parts of different
Right,
streets.
and just poured concrete everywhere.
Yeah, and poured
like just
concrete
like
everywhere.
concrete balconies and like concrete, like I don't even know what they'd be called, kind of like overlays of different areas, and like big balconies, and like then opening up to like big wide open kind of green spaces and stuff like that.
It's a really weird little place, and unless you actually work in one of those buildings, you would have never seen it, never gone there. There's no reason to go there, but it's this like weird little urban environment, kind of like stuck in like a weird part of downtown, and pretty much you only see office workers smoking cigarettes in there, like
Right,
an office
and
worker having lunch or
yeah,
something.
and occasionally you'll see like the maintenance man kind of like
Yeah.
looking through the trash cans, or I mean like changing the trash bags, I guess. But like yeah, those are weird parts of like cities. And we were playing a couple nights ago, and like we were just having a huge firefight in a scene just like that.
Very similar.
Yeah, and so like the way the scale and like the urban environments are rendered so realistically kind of like adds this extra dimension of interest, and like the enemies kind of like pop up on like all the different little like openings, and they like stick guns through windows, and then they'll be like rushing out of like different little like doors in the sides of buildings and stuff.
And when you enter the new environment, you're really kind of curious and focused first and foremost on where the trash and where the enemies are actually going to come from. And because the game is so realistic, each different scene is so different, and it's generally, pretty easy to find cover or defend yourself. And instead, all the interest comes from the scene and where the enemies are going to be in there. And in other games, I feel like it's more a balancing act of trying to figure out where you ought to go, and the enemies are just going to come pouring out at you.
Right,
Not too
and
much to it.
yeah,
Not too much interest there.
right, and so it's kind of like a strange or cool or maybe interesting game, because it makes it so the first thing you do is like you want to think about what you're doing and how you're fighting kind of before you want to fight. And I guess that's like what they do in the military and stuff, you know. Whereas like Call of Duty a lot more, you're kind of like rushing into the corridor to like get the first headshot, and it's kind of like a lot twitchier kind of a gameplay. And I guess Division is like it moves a lot slower too than like Call of Duty and stuff. So it really kind of like rewards like cover and like moving behind cover and kind of like sight lines and flanking the enemy and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. It's a much different shooter experience. Like shooting in this game is really unlike shooting in like Fortnite or Call of Duty. Like, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little different. You interact a lot more with the environment than you would in probably pretty much any other game, and the environment is really rendered beautifully. So it kind of like adds up to be pretty cool.
Yeah, we were appreciating too how the bullets go through windows and bushes, and I don't know if that is common to a lot of other shooters.
Right. Well,
But I know that I didn't expect the bullet to go through the window exactly the first time I shot one there.
Right, and so the bullets will go through, like, say there's a car with like the windshield busted out, and if you can kind of like see the enemy's arm in like through the back car window, you can kind of like put bullets into those little spaces, and like they'll really travel and hit the enemy. Whereas like objects aren't always kind of like rendered with so much detail or fidelity that anything like that's even possible.
It's so detailed that we kind of have fun shooting at different stuff and seeing how the game is going to respond to it.
Right. And it's funny because most of like, so you can kind of travel through like the environment in the game, and you'll find like mannequins or like beer bottles or, you know, any type of like trash. And then you can kind of shoot it, and it's always cool because like the bullets affect pretty much everything, and then it's all rendered so nicely that when something happens and it kind of disappoints me, it's like really disappointing.
Oh, yeah.
Like there was one area with a ton of bottles, and I remember earlier I'd been shooting and like the individual bottles were breaking. And then we found another area and I saw bottles again and I shot at them, and there were like 6 bottles that ended up being one object, and they all like broke from one bullet.
Oh.
And it was like really disappointing, but I guess only because so much of the other parts of the game are like really like it's just like cool, you know.
Yeah, a lot of the missions kind of have you walk through like a cool, more hyper designed tunnel or room or something that it seems like they kind of wanted you to shoot at and experiment with. And we took video of one of them that was just like a long room of mannequins, and you could kind of break them all apart
and
in
the
different
mirrors
ways.
too. That's cool, like mannequins and mirrors.
Yeah, and then there was another one that had all the walls covered with what's that stuff that like runs the ads?
Those like LED billboard type
Yeah,
things.
kind of like LED billboard type stuff, and there were LED patterns and stuff running on the strips or the glass or whatever it was, and you could shoot them all and break them all apart, and the patterns would kind of like stay on the pieces that crumbled to the ground.
Yeah, that was really cool.
We were also chuckling about the game has dogs and deer
Oh my god.
and a few other little animals that kind of.
There's like crows and pigeons too, but I took a few pot shots at a crow, but I didn't manage to hit it.
We tried to shoot the deer. Of course it died.
Yeah, we weren't sure if like the animals were killable.
Of course it would be killable. I mean, from how detailed everything else in the game was, it seemed pretty obvious. But still, he was killable. And now, whenever they appear, and you kind of get like a twitch to aim at the.
Oh right, like, not to like try to offend anyone, but like we definitely have been getting kind of like minor PTSD in the game where
just where you aim at the deer, or I caught John kind of snapping to like me as I was walking around one time, thinking I was an NPC.
Right, like it's like you're kind of walking down a quiet scene in the street that's this like urban war zone, and then like any little bit of movement, and you start pointing your gun at it, and then like probably if you keep playing, you get to the point where you just point the gun and you shoot.
Oh yeah, but the way that there's like those the dogs wandering the street is like a temptation to that or something. And like I couldn't figure out why they're
like pop
even in there
from behind a car.
Yeah,
so just like the way an enemy would, and then it's like every part of you wants to like just like go at that movement and start shooting it.
Hate killing those cute animals in games. Too soft-hearted. feel bad, even though
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
It's just
just a
pixels
computer
and it's like
computer
yeah,
generated
yeah.
animal.
It's like an object in the game. But yeah, that's really cool too though, just because for whatever reason the game does make you focus so much on those animals and like they're kind of all over. Oh, and another cool thing just like about the map and like the environment in general is it's like a really well done kind of post-apocalyptic scene. Like the plant overgrowth and like the kind of like way everything's been like abandoned and you can tell it's all been abandoned hastily. And so like the kind of like built environment and sort of the results of like whatever weird like virus or whatever they're talking about in the game, like the result of that is really like cool to go through. And what's the name of that one zombie movie? Oh, 28 Days Later. Remember like everybody liked so much the kind of post-apocalyptic scenes in that movie where like in the beginning the main character comes out of the hospital having like been in a coma or something and like the world has come to an end. And anyway, I remember people talking about that scene and how much they liked it. And Division is kind of cool just in that you yourself are kind of like moving in that scene and there's like a lot going on and it's kind of like cool or fun to just to interact with it, you know.
One thing I'm not like happy with, and maybe it'll change because we're still low level, but I feel like the bosses in the game have more health and they do more damage. They're bigger and tougher, but they're not exactly. There's nothing special about them.
Right. They're I wouldn't say they're like boring or unengaging boss fights, but they're just kind of
But
like
they're not
an
memorable.
extension of the gameplay you're used to.
Yeah, and like
Where like if you're killing the kind of like normal enemies and then a boss comes along, like it's like oh he's gonna take more bullets, but that's pretty much it.
yeah, I really doubt you could find anyone talking about a boss by name in this game.
Right.
I
Even
really
though they
doubt
do
that.
give names to some, like
Yeah,
there's
they
like
do
the
give names,
owl and
but
the
no one's ever
stranger.
gonna say like, "Oh, it was so tough to kill the owl." Like I had to read the strategy guide.
Right. Although maybe like as we go farther, maybe like into the heroic difficulties, like there'll be something. And then uh, it's hard though because it's like a game where there's nothing like supernatural going on.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
the only bosses they're rendering are like tougher guys.
Mhm.
And like maybe
They're
it's
supposed to be tougher guys.
yeah, and like maybe a guy with like heavier armor. Oh, there was one memorable boss fight, though it was memorable to me, not the fight itself. But remember we came to that weird little room and then there was like the security doors and then about 200 enemies were kind of like waiting for us and charging. But then there was the big boss guy who came out and he was just like beating on the window for like 8 minutes
Oh
while
yeah.
we killed his 200 buddies.
I guess I remember that. It was some memorable pre-fight behavior.
Right, right. And like that was kind of cool. And then I kept thinking while we were fighting him, like we just killed 200 of his buddies. And the whole time he was kind of like using a hammer to swing at some like security glass. And I was thinking, like, if you saw these guys kill 200 people, I think you'd give up before long. But he kept going, and then he came. He kind of spooked us a little.
Came
but then
out
he
and got
died.
killed.
Yeah, he. But anyway, he did come out and just like get killed like the rest of them. But that was a little bit memorable. But it had nothing to do with the actual mechanics of the boss fight or anything like that. It was just a script thing they put together, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. I think my complaint about the bosses is in most games I feel like I can remember kind of the hardest obstacles and hurdles or like bosses or parts that I had to overcome or we kind of like gradually overcame. And in this game, like, in a couple years, I don't know if I'll remember any of it.
Right. And I guess another complaint we talked about a little bit earlier is just like the progression from level 1 to level 30 is so quick.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if we play pretty much, but we're not like that hardcore gamers. And like really somebody could probably get from like level 1 to 30 in less than a week if they were kind of
Absolutely,
like playing
easily.
and especially if they were doing it again or like if they've played maybe Division 1. like you'll just blast right through the game. And I really wish that the like 1 to 30 took like twice as long. Like remember we said
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, I
better.
wish the max level was 50.
Yeah.
Then this would feel right. And like maybe I understand why they did that, just because there's so much of a focus. Like the way the progression of the gear is, any underleveled gear is perfectly useless, pretty much. So most of the gear in this game is going to have something to do with like level 30 gear, right? And that's probably like where they wanted to focus all their like balancing decisions or whatever. But anyway, I do wish there was like a longer progression, or that it like went on longer, just so you could kind of feel like you were a little guy in the game for longer.
Yeah, yeah. And we were kind of talking about the different Ubisoft games and how the combat and stuff in some of them is like so great. And then it's like they're kind of like missing these other like aspects that keep people in the game.
Yeah, there's like in every Ubisoft game, there's kind of like a fatal flaw or like something missing.
But it's like hard to put your finger on.
Right, because like ultimately Division 2 is like a pretty cool game.
It's
But
really cool.
yeah,
I mean, I would
yeah.
recommend it to anyone to play. It's a lot of fun.
Right, but it's definitely not a game that
that you could
you're
play obsessively for years or something like that.
right. Like you can definitely feel like an end in sight, even though like ostensibly Ubisoft is making kind of like an MMO FPS that they do want people to play for probably many years. And it just feels like it's shorter than that. It feels like there's not going to be too much more to get into. Like I know there's like raids and stuff like that, but it and like the game world doesn't feel very like big. You don't see other players very often, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's those dark zones and stuff, and we'll be exploring that a little bit too, but it's just like there's something missing. And like it was the same way in For Honor, where like the combat was kind of fun, and you could have a lot of fun playing it. You could have fun going through the story mode and like getting better with different characters. But ultimately, like it wasn't a game that you could just kind of obsessively play, you know.
Yeah, yeah, at least not for us. I mean, maybe we'll go back to it. Oh,
Right.
but in this book I was reading, Death by Video Game, wasn't very good. Wouldn't recommend it. Maybe I'll get a review of it up on the website. We haven't added or reviewed that much in the website. But anyway, the guy who invented Mud, Richard Bartle, that was the first MMO, I think, back in the 80s. He said that they had a discussion about the types of people that played their game and why the people played, why they kept coming back. And in the end, after a 200 long email chain, he went back and he identified 4 different types of players. So the 4 different types of players that Bartle identified were achievers, explorers, socializers, or killers. And he's talking about MMOs, but he says a healthy MMO needs a good mix of all of those to keep players in the ecosystem and interested in the ecosystem and playing the game. And he says, here's his quote here: "If you have a game full of achievers, players for whom advancement through a game is the primary goal, the people who arrive at the bottom level won't continue to play because everyone is better than them. This removes the bottom tier, and over time, all the bottom tiers leave through irritation. But if you have socializers in the mix, they don't care about leveling up and all that. So the lowest achievers can look down on the socializers, and the socializers don't care. If you're just making the game for achievers, it will corrode from the bottom. All MMOs have this insulating layer, even if the developers don't understand why it's there."
Right. Oh, that's really cool. So there's, what were they again? They were
Achiever, explorer, socializer,
and killer, which
killer.
is I guess like a player killer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So if you think about that in terms of Division 2, like who are the socializers? There's
None.
almost no
None.
social component
Missing.
of the game.
Yeah.
So
But they did kind of put, they kind of put it in place. There's like the clans. It's like they were thinking of that, but it's completely different from like signing into Warframe and you see the socializers instantly right away in that chat.
You see like a global chat, and you see all these people talking about the game, and it's all kind of like mysterious.
Yeah, when
And
you're a
then,
new player.
right? And like that so just like in Division 2, there's no chat room. You rarely, if you go through it, you'll probably never see another player. You know, like you sometimes see them at those weird little settlements or like
Yeah,
basements.
and when we first started playing at launch, when the game launched, we saw other players, and now playing now,
right, and so
we haven't seen one
the exact
maybe this
thing,
entire
the
time.
exact thing the guy described in the quote is like
Yeah.
happening where because there's no like lower level kind of like persistent social layer to this game, there's no new players. And like I know personally, and we've seen some of those like really high level guys, right? Like level 500 of like our guys now that we're level 30 have got to like level 2 of like whatever Valor rank or
Oh,
the
yeah.
secondary leveling system. And I saw these just like huge guys who'd clearly been playing a ton, and it was kind of like irritating, because like it's like, oh, like this guy's been playing for like 3 or 4 months, and he's like been playing 8 hours a day, and he's just like infinite level compared to me. And like for other players who probably don't play as much as us, with like nothing going on at that kind of lower level of the game, it makes the whole game seem kind of like desolate and
Yeah, yeah. And I remember
isolating, lonely.
when we first started playing ESO, it was so much more profoundly like that, because you could look at the other player who had been playing that game for years, and it was like immediately apparent. And then ESO had such amazing of that kind of socialization pattern going on.
Yeah. And like even to the point that in the towns in ESO, you'd see like all these just like plain idiots standing there playing rap music through like the
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
the
The
voice chat.
socialization was on overdrive.
Yeah, and that really like made it seem like there was something
Going on,
there.
absolutely.
Like to see like a gang, like if you see 15 people sitting around playing music, like that's just kind of cool.
Oh yeah, if you see 15 or 20 people in a restaurant, you're kind of interested.
Yeah,
if you see
and
15
like
or 20 people at a bar.
So if you walk into like a bar and there's like one other guy there, and he's clearly like the alcoholic who's been going to the bar
exactly what it's
for like 60
That
years.
is exactly what it's like.
And
there's
so,
one grizzled old alcoholic sitting at the bar.
Yeah, and there's like none of that socializing there. And like the socializing layer is what makes something feel alive.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you think of the Ubisoft games, they're almost all missing that, or it would seem to be that. And like I certainly have not seen any gathering of players in Division 2.
And it's like, well, if you're only going to be socializing at the elite level, like by the time you wish to join a clan in Division 2, it's it's failed. Because it's failed.
And like as a low level player, you don't want to touch the clan, because like even if you think back to ESO, remember how there were so many clans that want to like cater to the little player.
Oh yeah.
And like when you're a little player, you really don't want to join a gang or a clan because like,
they're doing the raid. You can't do that. You can't participate in it.
So like anything,
what good are you going to do them, or they're going to do you?
Right. Anything you're getting is just this bizarre form of like charity and hand holding, and you don't really want that. Like when you join a clan, you kind of want it to be like maybe like to do the raids, or else like for it to be like social. But like with the clan, and there's no voice, or there's no like text chat in Division 2.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's really no social reason I can really think of to join a clan. And like I don't see like clans recruiting, or like it's
and you can understand why not all games want to have that chat. It's like nasty. It has to be moderated. There's all like the different like instances with different chat. Like it all makes sense, but it is a completely different experience when you sign into a game and you can immediately see some kind of like social element going on,
and
versus one where you like, especially us playing together, like it may as well just be a single player game on a disc.
Right.
Like that's how Division has like felt. And we haven't seen another player the entire time.
It's felt like a co-op game for us, like a offline co-op.
Offline co-op.
Yeah. And like we haven't had to like rely on another player. I think it's this weird thing where so many games today are making this assumption that you have like a really booksome active friends list, and that your form of socialization is like playing games with pre-existing friends.
Right, which is
Whereas,
obviously true for a lot of people,
right,
but meeting people in games is also like a huge motivator for people to play, and
right,
meeting other
and
people who
that's
are
what was
good at the
so
game.
great about like Cyrodiil and ESO, is just that there were so many kind of like characters to meet, and like you always wanted to like think about what a person seemed like in chat versus like how actually good they were at the game. And stuff like that
Oh
really
yeah, yeah.
like that's
That's the
something.
social element that really makes it funny and
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah, and that's what makes a game kind of seem like more than this just like kind of pathetic thing you're doing in your living
Pathetic
room.
online thing in your living
Yeah,
room.
yeah. So yeah, I wish.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, and I wanted to say also, I think there's a lot of games now where they're like really focused on designing it for the killers. And it's like the game companies don't seem to realize. And like Naruto is kind of like that.
Oh
It's like
right.
become a killer, like become the most elite player killer of
Right.
like the
Oh,
other
and let
players.
me just say that the killers do not want to fight other killers or play with other killers.
Yeah.
They want to kill like the other layers and tiers of players. And that's why like a game needs to have like all of those elements.
Mhm.
Not like so many games like are wanting to be like about hardcore PvP
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. But that's really not the kind of like joy of the PvP, and like so much of what you want to do is like the interacting. And that's why like the killers, like remember ESO, like the killers really had a great time in Cyrodiil because they could kill so many scrubs and like newbies and like tryhards. You know what I mean? Like that's
Yeah, there
where.
was a constant flow of
Right,
the other
and
three tiers of players into
yeah,
there.
yeah, and like all of the kind of stuff that was really interesting was where those players intersected. Like when the achiever players would like fight the player killers, you know
Oh
what I
yeah,
mean?
that's
Like
so
that.
true.
And so that was always this
Yeah.
like clashing, and then like everyone could agree they like to kill like the socializers or like
Yeah.
the scrubs, like. But it was all the kind of like higher level interaction that made the game funner to play, and it was the interaction between people, not necessarily like the game interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. But it seems to me that the Ubisoft games, it's like they're missing some component of that like healthy player base mix or something. And it
Right,
definitely
right.
seemed like that in For Honor too. And
Mhm.
maybe part of it does have to do with like the PVE content and like its structuring and who's going to be
Right,
playing it and
and
like for what. And
we tried Far Cry together for a little bit,
oh
Far
yeah,
Cry 5, and like even that game might have had a little more to it if it wasn't just like the two of us playing, you know.
yeah,
And
definitely.
like it ultimately didn't add up to kind of like an experience we wanted to be having, or like a game we wanted to be playing or whatever. But you can imagine a different world where like there were lots of players in the Far Cry universe, and like maybe some way to interact with them, or something.
Another thing we were talking about with Division 2 that we don't have much to say about because we haven't tasted the full extent of its like gear and loot system. Oh, but with Path of Exile, I watched that Chris Wilson talk, and he talked about how the randomly generated loot was like crucial for the game's success in keeping players in the game and keeping them interested. And in Path of Exile, there's so many different ways to play with that loot that you get and alter it and change it and kind of like gamble on it or change it into something else. And so it's all really like exciting to get like an item that you might want to use a chaos orb on, or you might want to like do this too. And it kind of tickles the imagination. And then in Division 2, there's the random loot, and it seems like there's not very many tools to change it all. And it seems like that's what the people who've played longer are the most angry about.
Oh right, where sorry, I forgot what I was gonna say. Um, oh,
Just if you get something that could be good, you want to feel excited about how you can make it good and feel like
right, or
excited about the possibility of it,
change and
how you can
interact with
change and
it,
interact with
and
it. Yeah.
right, and if you just compare, or maybe that's just my opinion here, but if you like compare the loot in Path of Exile to the loot in Division, the stuff in Division just seems like maybe a little uninspired, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like it's well done, it's nice. You feel good getting loot in Division, but none of it really like excites you, and none of it is
Yeah, yeah,
like.
I guess it doesn't take random to the degree that Path of Exile does too, where there could be like really unexpected crap on the loot you pick up, genuinely unexpected.
Right,
like,
right.
wow, I've never seen
Yeah,
that
yeah,
before. I didn't
and
even know that could be in this game.
right,
I
and
didn't
like
even know something like
almost
that could
any
exist.
time we came across something kind of new or different in Path of Exile, it really like kind of set my mind ablaze.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where I'm like, oh man, like you could just do you could do a build based on that.
Yeah, you get
And
excited
so
about
like
it.
if you can find a piece of loot and think to yourself like, oh my god, I could do this dope build,
Mm-hmm.
then like yeah, that's like a great loot system. But there's nothing like that in Division. It's like, oh, like you found a good gun, like come on, not that good. And like nothing, there's no like, oh, like if you think of all the talents and like the special stuff on the loot in Division, none of it really like changes very much. Like there's like nice bonuses, and the bonuses are good, but none of it would actually kind of like really excite you about maybe like making a new character or like stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have more impressions of that after we actually try to use
Right,
the loot
maybe.
system a little more, which
Yeah.
I don't think we have.
Right, and if we play more, we'll probably have a lot more to say about the end game in Division. Maybe like what it's like, what there is to do, and stuff like that is always very like, for somebody who's never played the game, it almost seems like nonsense.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I just remembered one more thing I wanted to talk about. So I started to read Rainbow Six. I don't know if Rainbow Six the game is like the book, but I do know whatever Tom Clancy stuff is nothing like the Division 2. And we tried to watch some of the videos. I thought like, okay, I'm gonna watch it. I'm gonna concentrate on it. And all they were,
the so-called found footage.
Yeah, the so-called found footage. They're just like little scat films or something.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, and it's almost like unnaturally violent.
Yeah,
like,
it says like the hyenas murdering civilians, like whoever the civilians.
And then
are
it's just like a video of like a GoPro that someone had while they were murdering civilians.
And like, oh, stop, no.
Yeah,
then they get their brains blown out or something.
The worst one, in my opinion, was when like there's these suicide bombers, and with how realistic it is, it's almost like disgusting and probably should have been like banned by like whatever the ratings board is. But then there's the found footage of like the guy talking to the suicide bomber who's like about to charge at a bunch of civilians. And then the guy's going like, everyone will remember me, right, bro? And then the guy's like, yeah, everyone will remember you. Go do it, dude. And then like the bombing goes off, and it's like morbid. It's like the fact that they like made that just shows that they're kind of sick, and like nobody wants to see like.
Oh, I don't know. It's like, was it supposed to inspire in the player like feelings of allegiance to, again, like your personal gang? I don't know if the gang that you're playing in Division is just like U.S. Army operant or something.
Yeah, it said you're like a special gang.
Special force.
Somehow like the president after the apocalypse like authorized use of like excess force, and that's what the Division is. Or it's something like that.
Yeah, but anyway, the beginning of Rainbow Six is like this really tense plane flight with terrorists on the plane. And then like the main character's gang or whatever you want to call it that he named Rainbow Six, and they're going on like, his wife is there or something, they're going on vacation or flying to London or something, and they have to take down the terrorists. But it's nothing like it's nothing like just the weird little scat films that we saw in Division 2.
Oh right. Yeah. And I guess there's like the books based on the games or something like that.
Yeah, we looked it up. They got somebody to write a new book for the game, but whatever, I don't know, we could look at it, but whatever it is probably isn't like the Tom Clancy.
Right. It's probably not very good. I would imagine it's not very good, but you never know. I mean, what if like the guy who wrote it's a genius?
Yeah,
probably not, but
if any of you have read it, let us know.
Yeah. So did we have anything more to say about this?
No.
Okay, yeah, we're done. So yeah, like we went over our impressions of the Division 2
Yeah, thanks for watching.
Clancy's. Thanks for watching.
If you watched it all the way
Thanks for listening
through our awkward patches of silence that we had.
It wasn't that bad, I'd say, compared to other podcasts. I've heard podcasts where 3 people will manage to make awkward silences, if you can believe that, like 8-second silences, which I think our max one today was maybe 4.
Okay, so we gotta beat 8 seconds by just kind of spacing on something.
Right. Well, anyway, if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And we did get these things onto iTunes and Stitcher. So if you've somehow managed to be listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher or any other podcast thing, leave us a review. That would be nice, because the reviews kind of like add to your SEO rank and let other people find it. So that'd be nice if you listened and you enjoyed it all. It'd be nice if you could kind of help us out a little bit. And as we've said before in the past, check out our website, coopgaming.info. I think we have a little overlay on the video with the URL.
Oh, yeah, and we do have a little bit of footage from our gameplay, so we'll probably be uploading that. Nothing too special about it, but...
Yeah, we were planning on kind of having ourselves for this video overlaid over our gameplay, because we had like an extended gameplay cut, and our computer wasn't good enough.
Not good enough, so we gotta upgrade the equipment.
Until we spend about $4,000 on like a computer that could do something like that, we're not going to have any videos like that. But anyway, thanks for listening. Goodbye.